Hello, I'm just recording this quick apology because, it looks like the video is going to be a day late. I recorded everything I needed to for today. Then I went to pick up my son from school, came back to the office, and found that my iCloud had just unloaded everything. So now I'm having to re-sync everything, I guess. Quite like this framing. Might use it in the future. But yeah, this is where we're at. See that? Everything's currently syncing, loading, uploading, downloading, and all the other rest. So, but as they say, on with the show. Hello! Today is Monday the 14th of December, or day 50 of this weird experimental diary video thing. My goodness. So a couple of things up top before we get into this. First of all, I think this is going to be the last time I do a video of this style, being that this is the unemployment coronavirus diary 2020, and for one, I'm no longer unemployed. Two, I am no longer under lockdown, and three, 2020 is only around for a couple more weeks. So I'm gonna have a little bit of a think this week, and hopefully on Friday we'll have a whole new format, because I mean, for one, this setup isn't working for me. I mean, to focus I have to it's the focus, yeah. So there have been a couple of videos where the focus on my face has been a little bit soft and might have looked like a dream sequence of some kind. We're gonna have a rethink of everything. So this weekend I got some work done with my son. I'll do a quick little insert here. There you go, that's what I was doing with my son. But as well as that, all I really did this weekend was chill out with family and play some Cyberpunk 2077. Obviously not at the same time, because there is no way I'm playing that game anywhere near my children, just because of the violence and stuff. But this is going to be my last video talking about it, because for one, I don't think I want to do my first ever games review with a game like that, and secondly, there are some issues I find with that game, beyond technical issues obviously, that I'd like to kind of unpack, or at the very least get off my chest. So first of all, the technical issues. I mean, you just have to do a cursory search for Cyberpunk 2077 to see article after article about the technical issues, from ridiculously slow frame rates to loading times to large chunks of the environment just disappearing. I mean, last night I fought someone, and when I shot him, he suddenly jumped 12 feet into the air and started trying to fire at me in a crouching position 12 feet in the air. I mean, my gameplay has been riddled with bugs, and normally I'm very forgiving with games. I'm not the kind of person who gives a damn about frame rates and things like that, as long as it doesn't slow down to such a point where it's like dial up in the 90s, then that sort of stuff doesn't really matter to me. Things that matter to me are the things that just kind of like break the immersion. Things like, you know, entire environments being textureless and things like that. What has bothered me about this game is in fact the world building, but I'll get onto that in a minute. First, I want to talk about character customization, creation, genitals, and transness. I've mentioned before that I'm not really ready to talk about my gender identity yet. I will eventually, but just not yet. I want to talk about transness in Cyberpunk 2077. A good friend of mine has mentioned this week that this game doesn't really represent transness, it more fetishizes transness. I absolutely agree. Though I would also add on to that the game overall fetishizes a lot more than just transness. It fetishizes sexuality as a whole. Every advert in this game is an innuendo, or just overtly sexual, both in regards to heteronormative sexuality and transness. My assumption with trans representation in this game is that it started from a well-intentioned place. Probably early in the development, they wanted trans representation in there. They didn't want to be trans exclusionary, and obviously that's where we were given particular character customization options. But very soon after getting into the game, it became abundantly clear that as well-intentioned as they were with this representation. It came from a place of ignorance and naivete. And it became very clear that the only real exposure they have to trans people is problematically through pornography. I'm not going to comment on whether or not they had trans people within their development team, but it is very clear that if there were trans people part of their development team, their voices weren't the most prominent. Chances are it was like one or two trans voices in a overwhelmingly cis hetero room full of people. At the same time, I'm not going to condemn them. Really, representation needs to start somewhere, and it will only get better and more healthy if we are actually able to discuss it openly. In my experience, there hasn't been much trans representation in AAA gaming as a whole. And before this game came out, we were talking about how we need trans representation in games. Now we have some problematic trans representation, but then that allows that representation now to evolve. It was a clumsy, ham-fisted and naive attempt at trans representation. That shouldn't be where the conversation ends. At the very least, we should use this as an opportunity to discuss more healthy forms of trans representation in entertainment and particularly gaming. It just doesn't help that this representation is on a backdrop of really juvenile humor. I'm a big fan of the Grand Theft Auto series, but the difference between Grand Theft Auto's juvenile humor and Cyberpunk's juvenile humor is that Grand Theft Auto, it's juvenile by design. It's intentionally juvenile because it's satire, and whether its core audience realize it or not, but the game is actually making fun of them. Whereas in the world of Cyberpunk, all those raunchy advertising campaigns that they have on the billboards around you feels like they were aiming for something more mature, something more edgy and grown up, and it has come off as unintentionally juvenile. I think this game takes itself far too seriously and just comes off as forced edginess, and I hate to say this game is boring. One thing I have learned from this game though is to never get pulled into the hype. This game has also taught me that there are layers to criticism, and as uncomfortable as a lot of this game has made me, it's given me a lot to think about as far as where we can go next, how we can avoid these kind of conundrums of representation in the future. I mean, the simplest way to avoid this is to make sure that if you are representing a particular group, make sure they're actually in the room when you're developing that representation. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about it, and I think that's all I'm going to say on the subject. It's the last video I'll ever have discussing this game, hopefully, unless some mind-breaking thing happens that makes me go like, bloody hell, never saw that coming, well done, which I seriously doubt. I'm gonna soldier through the game and finish it because, you know, I paid for it a year ago and waited a year for it, and hopefully nothing else in the game makes me uncomfortable. So my question for you today is, have you played it and what did you think of it? Until next time, take care, speak to you soon, goodbye.